Hello and good afternoon, and welcome to the Northwest Pinball and Arcade Show 2022. We're really happy to have you back here, and it's my pleasure to introduce you Mr. David Thiel and his presentation, Audio for Interactive Pinball 2.0. David.
That was the sound check. And that was a little noodle that I wrote. I get new synthesizers all the time, and sometimes I'm inspired to make something that's not associated with the project. And that was one of them, so I wanted to share that. That picture reminds me to thank everybody involved in this show for putting on this show. I want everybody to put your hands together for the committee that puts on this show. It's not about me, it's about them. Fantastic. It was not easy. I know the president, he told me it wasn't easy. Now it's been 4 years since I talked at this show. See, they invite me to come here a lot because I'm cheap. Primarily. And the last time I was here, so for those of you not good with acronyms, that's Jersey Jack, Pinballs, Pirates of the Caribbean. The second time I've done it. The first time I did it with Dwight, and he's right here. And hopefully I'll never do it again. But it's been 4 years, right? Wow. Now, it's been 6 years since I gave one of these things, like a full hour. And at Christmas time in 2020, in December, I made this bold prognostication. Now, I know you can't read it, but I'll just summarize. Happy holidays to everybody. It's been a while since the machine that was being manufactured that had audio in it by DDT, that's me. 2021 promises to be different. Without going into details, there will be 4 pinballs that I've provided the audio package for, from 4 different manufacturers. I said that at Christmas 2021, and like an idiot, I posted that on Facebook. There will be 4 pins. Son of a bitch. Okay, this did not happen. And this is a theme in my talk, Life, Consulting in Plague Time. Now, on the bright side, I'm 50 pounds lighter than I was a year ago right now. And I say that because a lot of people came up to me and asked me, did you do that on purpose? Yeah, I did that on purpose. I wasn't sick or anything. I know I'm old, but that didn't happen. But the last few years have been a little challenging, and that's a sound, that's when you kill Ned from a game I've worked on, but I thought it went well with that guy's picture on the poster. So what happened? Well, here we are, force majeure. If you ever sign a contract for anything, you always run into this French term, and it sends me off, to the dictionary because I want to know what I'm signing. And it's an event or an effect that cannot be reasonably anticipated or controlled. Well, I think we're getting in the neighborhood of what's happened in the last few years. So, now, is there anybody here that doesn't know anything about Deep Root? Oh, I was afraid of that. Is there anybody here who would not like to hear about this? Okay, well, to summarize, Deep Root was a company created by a guy who had access to money. He was a lawyer, and a pinball fan, and he wanted to revolutionize pinball. So he's from Texas. He created a company in San Antonio, Texas. But I put up force majeure, right? And it's not what you think. The only reason I bring this up is because the effect that I couldn't control or anything was I live on a slope in Redmond, Washington, and in 2017 we had record rains in February, and my slope moved. And so you're looking at, that's a foundation cave. That shouldn't be there. That's underneath the footing for my house. That's bad. And so to fix that cost a lot of money that the insurance company doesn't touch because, well, they don't touch stuff caused by soil movement unless it's sudden, like an earthquake. So that's why force majeure, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So I got a call from Dennis who said, there's this stuff going on in Texas, and it's really cool, and you ought to come down and check it out because they need a sound guy. And sounded promising. Dennis, Dennis Nordman, everybody knows who Dennis is, right? Whitewater and such. Barry Ausler, legendary, needing to get back into pinball. I mean, he tried with Highway. He did 3 designs with Highway, and none of them got made. Poor Barry. And then John Norris, a guy, very talented guy from Gottlieb/Premier, right? And so this was interesting. So I flew down to Texas. I saw many things that convinced me, and they were going to pay me a lot of money. So I did this. Now, for those of you who know something about Deep Root, not that long ago, the SEC, the Securities Commission, came and shut the whole thing down because Robert created his money with an investment fund, the Deep Root Investment Fund, and he basically invested the money of Deep Root Investment Fund in his pinball venture, which was bleeding money. And he burned through, it depends who you ask, but somewhere between $40 and $60 million. So that's why this is mildly interesting to the pinball community, because clearly it's the biggest financial malfeasance ever involved, associated with pinball. Now, I can't get into any more details than this because I signed a 5-year NDA, and that's not going to not be in effect until like October of next year. But I have read a lot of things. I mean, there's 6,000 posts on the Deep Root thing on Pinside. And there's a lot of speculation from people who don't know that this was just always a scam, that nobody could be this inept. Trust me, they were. They were all soldiering on. There were 100 people hired, working. It was an earnest effort from all the employees that were hired. They were really, really, really trying to do what Deep Root was supposed to do. But force majeure and the plague and the bad weather and anything else is not an excuse for what happened to Deep Root. I would argue that it was basically crushing inexperience. There were people like myself and Dennis and John and Barry who had experience, but only Barry was in San Antonio. And if you know Barry, he's incredibly productive, but not the kind of guy who goes outside his office and tries to steer the ship in the right direction or tell the emperor he has no pants on. Okay, so that's the amount of Deep Root stuff that I'm willing to do, except that I wanted to share some of the work that I did. I worked with Deep Root for 3 years. And normally in my career, that would be at least 5, maybe 6 pinball audio packages. And you haven't heard any of them. Well, you will today. You're going to hear little bits and snatches of some of the work that I did. And unfortunately, this is the only place you're ever going to hear it. And the most mature product that I worked on was involved in this notion. It was a project that somebody whose name I hesitate to mention created for a company called Zidware, and Deeproot inherited this because the owner of the company thought it was a good idea. But the rest of us got tasked with making this a great pinball machine, and we tried.
Martians are invading the Earth! Led by the villainous warmonger Ned.
I'm so evil.
But the rebellious Martian princess Angela has other plans.
Invasion is stupid.
With the gravity drive sabotage, the saucers plummet. Hurtling toward Adventureland, an amusement park built around a defunct nuclear power plant that happens to be on top of a graveyard.
Of course.
The crash releases a wave of latent xenon gas, reviving the dead and letting them run amok. And seizes control of the zombie army with new plans to take over the world. It's terror and mayhem in Pinball, Atomic Zombie Adventureland.
So, you know, if you were trying to scam $40 million, would you make that? I mean, why bother? It doesn't make any sense. So, this was in part supposed to be a pinball sound design talk, version 2.0. So let's talk about sound design a little bit within the context of Deeproot. And this is basic stuff. You know, the game exists, there are game rules, and things happen in the game. You hit a target, you go through a lane, events occur, right? And the way I think it should be done is that there's a sound system which hides all the complexity that exists in making sound for all those game events, and they exist in a sound system, which is a subsystem of software somehow, and that's where I work. Because I don't just make sounds. I'm not just a pretty face. No, I code. So I code behavior. I do a dynamic mix, and I make groups of sounds. There's a lot of things that I do so that the programmer, so I don't have to ask the programmer to do it. Now, there are about 2,000 sound assets in Raza. So that's the complexity part of it, which I'm trying to hide from the programmer because I don't want him having to ride hurdle over all that. And so the sound events that I expose back to him for game events, there's about 500 of those, and it's easier for him to deal with, or her. The thing that was different at Deeproot was that where I did my work was in Fmod. Now, that's a picture of Fmod's interface. It's a sound design thing. It's a library, sound design library created in Australia by a company that's existed for more than 10 years. A lot of companies use it, like big AAA video game companies, Disney and 2K and Microsoft and stuff like that. I wouldn't say it was overkill for pinball, and it was great. It wasn't my decision. Imagine that. That was another problem. But, let's move on. So, like most things at Deeproot, Fmod is not usually the way this works. When I work with other clients, there is something vaguely like a sound system, but it typically has been written by some game programmer who's a very sharp programmer who grudgingly writes something to handle the sounds and provides a way for me to code that behavior, usually in a text file or something. And maybe there's an audition tool or something, you know. We get the work done. But Fmod, it was fun, and it was very powerful. So I tried some things with Deeproot projects that I normally wouldn't, it was too hard to do on other platforms.
Net attack multi-ball!
So I'm going to use this as an example of one of the things I did. Net Attack Multi-Ball was an event where you do jackpots, and then you have to hit another shot, hit an orbit flashing red orbit to requalify so you can make more jackpots. And you alternate back and forth between that. So it's good for the player to know what they're trying to do. Are they trying to shoot for Ned, who's a little target going back and forth like this at the top of the playfield, or should they be shooting for the orbit shot? So we have dynamic music, which helps reinforce which state you're in. So I took a piece of music and I horizontally decomposed it, meaning I just broke it into 3 layers.
Ned, attack!
Wrong. Right. So that's the first layer. That always plays.
Bring it, Earth Weasel!
That's Ned. And that animation plays when Ned is up, and he's the shot you should be shooting for. It's playing on the back glass display. That's and the target's underneath him. After you hit him, oh no, okay. So that deep voice, that's Ned, and that helps reinforce that's what you should be doing. If you hit Ned, then you're on a search to find Ned, and you hit the orbit shots. Okay, now I'm going to put all this together, simple example. This simplifies it hopefully for the programmer, because all he has to do to change states is he changes a variable from 0 to 1. So 0 when Ned's up, 1 when we're looking for Ned.
Ned, attack! Multi-ball!
I'm out of here! Back in the fight!
Okay, now part of the sound design for this is a high traffic area. As long as you can keep multi-ball going, you're going to be going back and forth between these 2 states a lot. And in fact, they have a video game concept of a strength bar, and if you take him all the way down, you've finished the mode for a big bunch of points and stuff. So to keep it from A, becoming boring, and B, to reinforce the fact that every time you do it, you get more points, there's a progressive sound effect that is used with some call-outs that Ned responds to having been hit.
I'm out of here! Strategic cowardly escape! You win this time, but I'll be back!
And there's 21 progressions of that jackpot sound, right? So hopefully you get the idea, ooh, that was better than the previous one. Ooh, ooh. Then he's hidden, and so you have to hit him, and there's a sound effect for finding him, and he comes back, and he talks.
I'm back, baby! Back in the fight! I'm back from the Ned!
The writing was not too bad. These guys were trying hard. And again, if you were trying to scam $40 million, would you bother to be clever? I don't think so. Okay, when this game was virtually done, and they were getting close to trying to sell it, they hired a company to make a promo video. And a professional company came in. I don't know, it was in Texas. I was up here, I had no idea. And after they got the video done and edited, the production company had used some library music on it, and it wasn't very good. And they came to me and said, you know, could you post this? Could you do something and fix this? And I said, absolutely, because this is a point I make to all my clients. You know, when you make these trailer videos for your game, please use sounds from the game. Stop taking some trailer music and just playing it. It's false advertising. That's not what's in the game. You show the game. Why don't you play the sounds? Okay, so I was thrilled they asked me. And I like doing this kind of stuff because I almost never get to arrange sounds over a 2-minute period. This is probably the longest video I have.
Retro Atomic Zombie Adventureland.
I assume you're shaking with fear.
Come on! We gotta stop that gross freak Ned!
Led by the villainous warmonger Ned.
I'm so evil.
By the way, my name is Patrick.
Now, the really sad thing about all this is those two machines that they photographed, those are the only two production prototypes they ever made. That makes me sad. Because I worked on this for like 2 years, not continually, but like over a 2-year period. So I had quite a bit invested. Now, I wanted to feature this guy because I thought he did a great job. And this is, I think, his professional voice talent job. You know him from Pinball Profiles.
Ned is an alien jerk who's invading Earth. Angela hates him and made him crash. Now Adventureland is flooded with xenon gas that makes zombies.
Yeah, Jeff Thiel, I thought, did a great job. He took direction really well. I told him to be sort of like the guy from Rocky and Bullwinkle, William Conrad. I said, be kind of like that, and he did a great job. So this frustration slide, get it all out. That's all I can do. I'm frustrated, and if you like this, then you should be frustrated too. But I don't want to end on a dismal note. There's the charming Dennis Nordman. Now, Dennis did 3 playfields while he was at Deep Root, and this was the one that was probably 4th in line. It was a game, Dennis came up with this crazy Indiana Jones discovering the meaning of a lost artifact found in the desert kind of thing. So it was the machine, right? And you're trying to figure out what the machine does because it's obviously a post-apocalyptic space that all science fiction exists in. And I'm going to show you, it was just some graphics they generated for this, and I made some sounds to go with the graphics. And if you knew the metaphor, all that stuff makes sense. Okay, let's continue on. Let's soldier on. Something else to be sad about. I first met Barry in 2017 at Pintastic. We were both doing presentations. I knew of Barry since I joined the pinball industry in 1986, working for Data East, and the game that we had at our shop to examine, to figure out what I should be doing was Pinbot, Barry's game, and very impressed with that and Chris Granner's work. I liked Barry a lot once I finally met him. He's a great guy and crazy productive. Food Truck was number 2 in the line. That was going to be the second game made. They had the license for Goonies. And that was a Barry game, and he had a playfield for that. And I think a Whitewood. And we also had the Who license with a very nice, interesting Whitewood that Barry had done. But I'm going to talk about Food Truck because that was the #2 game that we were going to make, and it was pretty far along. The sound package, well, in any case, when you play Food Truck, there were 4 trucks. There was a taco truck, a beverage truck, a kebab truck, and a burger truck. And I thought that for main play, you pick one of those trucks as your character, and so the background should reflect that to remind the player, oh, I'm the burger guy, and so these features on the playfield are buffed a little bit more than if I were the taco guy. So that's a trick. Because they were, this company was fairly woke, and so they had picked all these ethnic characters, and they're doing this dance not to be offensive to any of them. So we have a taco truck, but I'm trying to be like a taco truck, but no, not be like a taco truck. Okay, then we had a beverage truck, which was an Asian woman. Had I finished it, that song has lyrics, and I was going to hire some woman to be like a Japanese pop singer. Our drinks are so very good. It was going to be cool. Our shish kebabs are hip hop. That's my all-American burger music. Okay, the other thing that's interesting about Deep Root, it was a bad idea, but he had a studio that he created out in Salt Lake City and populated by more than 24 people. He had a 3D pipeline. He could do Pixar-style graphics. And so this was the first project, Food Truck, was that they were applying all that technology. And so every game event, every scoring event, everything had things generated from that pipeline. This is an example of one of them. So, and I had put sounds for all of those. John Norris. I didn't know John before this because while I had worked at Gottlieb, I was long gone from there by the time John showed up. I knew of his work when I went to Germany a few years ago, and I played it in an arcade there. I played a whole bunch of Stargate, and I was fairly impressed. There's a lot going on in that game. What I'm going to show you is, again, that 3D pipeline, but this is let's see. Yeah, it's called a daily. So they test geometry, they test coloring, they test, the way the world works and stuff. And this is some music that I was beginning to think about for what this arcade is. Well, I should say, Merlin's Arcade was John's take on 8-Ball Deluxe. I mean, it has 8-Ball Deluxe, but much more. And the notion is that Merlin time travels, and he came to the 80s, and he saw an arcade, and he liked it, and he took it back as a concept, as a place to test the valor of knights. I'm just the sound guy, okay? And so there were all these nights, and then all these events on the playfield. There was a giant, the biggest spinner I've ever seen, which is the foosball guy, and there was darts, and there was pool, obviously. So this is what that looks like. One of the events it was a hoops. You know that hoop thing you do where you put a quarter in, you throw endless, well, you put $1 in, and I'm showing my age, you throw endless basketballs into a hoop. And the thing about this one, this is a very primitive first graphics version of it, and you'll notice he's not colored yet, but there's a surf forming the hoop and I made a crude loop with that just to go with the music. Good news, bad news. The good news is I'm done sharing stuff that you'll never be able to buy if you liked it. I mean, I wanted to share it because this will be persisted out on YouTube and people have a chance to hear this, and I did the work and I like it and I thought it'd be fun for people to hear it. The bad news, however...
Hi, David. It's Lyman. This is our new friend, Cactus Canyon.
The good news, or the bad news in this time period just doesn't end. And those of you who don't know, that was the voice, the charming voice of Lyman Sheets. And I worked on Cactus Canyon for about 5 months with Lyman. And then, you know, I didn't work with him this year at all. And then all of a sudden, I got some mail from a friend, from Butch, who said, "Hey, did you hear about Lyman?" I was like, and it's tragic. Lyman is very much a legend, and I worked with him for the first time working on Steve Ritchie's Spider-Man. And frequently, I'll work on a project before I actually have the machine, but Lyman was very specific in what he wanted and stuff. So I didn't have a machine yet, so he shared the dots with me so that I could get on board.
This is some rockets that come in. I'll play it one more time without the Lyman sound effect.
Yeah, Lyman had a really interesting sense of humor, and you know, he's gonna be sorely missed. So from Lyman's direction, I did that. So on Cactus Canyon, I don't know, anybody not know that it wasn't finished? It wasn't finished for circumstances that are beyond the scope of this talk. And CGC, you know, is in the business of recreating these things, but it didn't make sense to recreate an unfinished game. So they dug deep and messed with the code so that they could go in and finish the game, and they hired Lyman to do it. And they hired me to make some more sounds. There was no match effect in the game when it was shipped. Well, there is now. There was another event associated with the left orbit where you have to shoot the left orbit and then shoot it again, and you can, and then you shoot it the third time, you start a mode. I think it's a timed mode, and then for big points, you have to come around from the other side, doing the right orbit into that area to score the feature before the timer times out. And the music they had, again, I don't think it wasn't finished. And I think they may have been running out of space in the DCS system too. So I wrote a whole new piece for that. Oh, I had the picture. Yeah, so Ride 'em Cow, Buck and Bronco, Wild Ride, and then on the third pass, this mode starts. Now that last bit may seem a little repetitive. It is on purpose because that part is the part that we loop, and that'll occur during pretty much the last 10 or 12 seconds of the mode, and that repetition should subliminally tell you I had better complete this because obviously it's getting tense because they keep playing that damn riff. So I think it's safe to say the last 3 years, for different reasons, have been a challenge. Companies disappearing, financial malfeasance, people passing away, you know. So, you know, what's a sole contractor amidst this little boat in a big pool of water to do? I have considered this. Oh no! That was simulated. So what do? You reboot. You turn it off, turn it back on again. So as part of my Deep Root thing, I became non-exclusive with them about 23 months ago. And so I found a company that wanted to hire me to do something. And they had a really nifty license. And I'm very excited about it. And over the past 23 months, I've worked on it, not constantly. And it's done. And it's just waiting to get into that production line queue. So you can't get it yet, but you will get it. I don't know if it will be this year, but I'm so excited when you can get it. But it has to remain super secret. It's not my secret, you know. I would love to tell you about it. And I've been talking to clients, but I can't tell you about it. And I have another one, but I can't tell you about it. And yeah, there's one more. See, that's the amazing thing is here in modern times, when I started 2006, there was one client, you know. And now it's a ridiculous number of clients, and they're in different time zones. I've just dealt with somebody who was 9 time zones away. You know, it's crazy. Good for me. My criteria is, based on previous experience, do they actually manufacture pins? Because everybody seems to want to design one. But I'm really getting sick and tired of doing all this work and having to give a presentation and say, see, I was busy. I wasn't just... Okay, this talk's supposed to be about pinball sound design. So let's talk about spinner sounds. Now, I didn't do that, but I went out on Pinside, which is, of course, the authoritative voice of all mature pinball, and looked around, and I saw at least 3 people reference Sea Witch, and they said, that's a great spinner sound. So that's my example. Now, why would I even dedicate a little chunk of this talk to something as mundane as a spinner sound? Because spinner sounds are the single most dynamic event in a pinball game. It depends how you hit it. You could just dink it, right? Or you could hit it better. Or you could really nail that sucker, right? And that's cool. Now, that's the naive approach where the sound guy just gives them a spinner sound, and the pinball programmer triggers the spinner sound. And that's okay, you know, because the spinner sound is fundamentally kind of exciting. But sound guys can do much better. We should be able to couple that to some notion and really make that exciting. So why is this even a challenge? Why is this worth talking about? Well, it's because we are in modern times. And in modern times, pinball sound systems are strictly playback. You have wave files, and you play them back. You can adjust their volume. You can play multiples of them at a time, but that's all you can do. I mean, this is not a synthesis environment. 1986, when I was working at Data East, we had a synthesizer on there, and I could make spinner sounds. I could parameterize them. I could just at runtime make an infinite number of really exciting things. If I want an infinite number of exciting things, now I have to pre-render those and store those, and it's much more cumbersome. So where do you begin? Well, you need a spinner sound, something that should work. Now, those are 3 control pages of a synthesizer that I have. And it's challenging because that one synthesizer comes with 2,137 presets, different sounds, okay? And then I could just dive in and start adjusting knobs and make an infinite number of them. So finding something that would be useful for spinners is challenging. And then understand that I own 300 synthesizers. So, riding herd upon all this horsepower is part of my job, right? I've accumulated these over the last 16 years, and I probably have a good grasp of 12 or 15% of them. Okay, that slide shows my digital audio workstation. And 2 things are happening here. One is I've put that sound into the DAW, I'll call it a DAW, and I'm triggering it different notes. Those are just different MIDI keys, right? But the other thing, you can see this line. I'm also adjusting tempo. Now, tempo for this sound changes how the reflected sounds, those delays happen. And the notion on the design of this was sort of like the air going out of a balloon, right? As you spin, and then it goes down. So I'm trying to generate a series of sounds which will, be part of that. And I have an example of some later ones, some lower ones and slower ones. So the energy is clearly out of that, right? So, okay, great. I've got this in my DAW. I've created 16 MIDI notes on my thing. I rendered that out as a WAV file. I put that in SoundForge. I region all those things. Now I have 16 WAV files. I grab those. I stick those in a folder that a pinball machine could know about. I go into a table, and I install those in the spinner table. Then I load that code up on the pinball machine, because the only way I can really test this and know confidently that this is working the way it was working in my head when I thought about it is to hear it on the machine. And why is that? So this is that sound with all that stuff done. Well, that's kind of interesting. Now, what if we nail the spinner shot? Well, that's interesting, but it wasn't what I was trying to do. It's wrapping. Now, the other bit of challenge is the spinner is not only a dynamic sound, but the behavior of the spinner is different depending on how it was implemented. That could be a micro switch, or that could be a leaf switch, or in this case, that could be an opto. And with an opto, there's no friction, so you get a whole lot of spins. And the way the spins lose energy, that's unique. Optos, at least, are consistent between machines. Those other techniques are based on who was the last pinball tech who adjusted that switch. So it's a little challenging to get the thing that's going to work the way it should. So I go back to the DAW, and I make some more sounds, because obviously 16 aren't going to cut it for this system. And then, thanks to Darren, I had a conversation with somebody I play video games with. Darren has a Hobbit, and he said, there's that thing when you nail the spinners, and every time you get more points for them, and the excitement goes up. I wish the sound did that. So I said, well, let's try that, and I inverted the order of the sounds. Instead of going for this dissipating energy thing, I went for this ooh, 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 more exciting as you do it. And I generated 39 of these things, which I pulled that number out of scientific deliberation and the nether regions. that's promising, but the real test is you nail it. Okay, and I'm not going to say that's the end-all or be-all or the best spinner sound I ever made, but I think it's more interesting than da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So, okay. Oh, good, we're right in, this is the finale. Okay. Once upon a time, there was a riff. It was created by a young man for a video game because he thought the music coming from the Japanese video games really wasn't that compelling for his audience, which at the time was 13-year-old sweaty boys in arcades. So he created a riff, and then he wrote a synthesizer that could make a bass drum, and in a gnarly kind of way, could play that riff. But back in the old days, there were no keyboards, musical keyboards, which attached to computers. So he had to write this music down on staff paper. Then he had to code the music into hexadecimal by hand. Then he had to stick that on the soundboard, which was running his algorithm, and then he got this. Okay, and then it was gone. The game was not very successful. Only engineers liked it. And it just disappeared. And in 83, there was a kind of a coin-op crash, and they built 3,000 of them. So, you know, they're out there in the universe. And our young man was sad. Many years went by, and he became not a young man. And in the ensuing years, people such as himself remembered the good time that they had had as 13-year-old sweaty boys playing in arcades. And they sought out vintage coin-op machines. They went to shows where people drug their machines out of their basements, and they played these machines. And all of a sudden, the riff was back. Better yet, many people wrote a multiple arcade machine emulator that ran on computers, and it could play the ROM images of this game. And lots more people played this. And eventually there was a cult following, probably a lot of engineers who found this game fun. So, the young man became an old man, but he realized many of his clients were asking him for things that he thought were, gee, that's a lot like that thing I did 40 years ago. So for this show, I brought back our riff a little different. the little riff that could. I have to acknowledge, again, NWPAS. This is a fantastic thing they do. Specifically, Mike Lorraine. I met Mike, 2008, first time I gave one of these. He's always done a fabulous job doing the AV. Now he's the president. And it's been a real challenge to bring this show back to life after 2 moribund years. I think he's done a great job. Can we have a hand for Mike? He's back there. And then, like my friend Butch says, Butch is on next, virtually. And anytime you see one of these shirts that says staff and has the picture on the thing on the back, go up and congratulate them for this, because, wow, what an effort this is. And they do a fabulous job. I don't dare go home without my wife makes this possible, because I'm a sole proprietor, single guy doing this out of a basement for the last 16 years. And if I didn't have the support of my fine woman, just no way I could have done that. Plus, she's so talented. You've all heard her, probably. She's the computer voice in Star Trek, Steve Ritchie's. And she's also Tron. She's the computer voice, right? Yeah. Plus, based on Dwight Sullivan's request, she's the little girl at the front of Pirates of the Caribbean going, yo, oh, yo. That wasn't me. That was Carol. No, it wasn't Dwight either. Okay, and finally, I work as sole proprietor, no help. It's a solitary adventure that I pursue, except through Slack, I talk to other people. And getting connected with so many people in this room, people who've invited me to their houses, I've played games in their collection, the community's always been very embracing, and that's wonderful for me. So, give yourselves a hand for that.
Bye-bye.
Nope. Questions? Anybody have a question? Dwight? See that there microphone? I don't want to have to repeat this. I knew you were going to heckle me.
I'm not heckling you. So what was the final outcome of your house? Did you get it all fixed? Are you on solid ground now?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for asking. Yeah. It was crazy expensive. At one point, I had a machine that could dig 40-foot deep holes, this big around, that they could then pump concrete into, and I have 13 of those. And then a lot of wood to make a retaining wall, and they buried all that, And so everything is on this side of the retaining wall is being retained, which includes my house. Then all the footings were redone, and there were like 18 of them. And my living room no longer sags because it cantilevered past the house foundation. Oh, God. Yes, thank you for asking. That was quite a life-changing event. But it's all done, At the end of the day, I just refinanced my house for more than what I paid for it to cover the cost of the debt. And so now I have a brand new mortgage, a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. When I got it, I think it'd be like 96 when, what a foolish investment. You think I'm paying that off. Okay, no more questions? Nobody on the internet asked a single question? Nobody cares? I hate you people.
Yeah, no internet questions.
Oh, good.
Oh, wait, we got one.
Yeah, what was the name of the video game that your riff was originally from?
Oh, that was Reactor. It was Gottlieb's first homebrew video game. Developed in-house. Tim Skelly, who's sadly no longer with us either, had come from Cinematronics, and he was the only one at that video game division who had ever made a game before. All the rest, I came from an insurance company. But Tim was a rock and roll guy in a mall organ world, and he really was down with what I was trying to do with it, and wonderfully supportive. And it was new for him because Cinematronics, those games, the sounds for those were done by an engineer. Those sounds were hardware sounds, some op amps and resistors and capacitors, and the game could make 5 sounds, and each one was a circuit. So, what I was doing with a processor where it could make anything I was clever enough to program was a world away from Tim's experience. Mike.
So, David, pinball machines have a lot of modes, correct?
Only if they're designed by Keith Johnson. Why?
Some have a few, some have a lot. And so during the process, I know sometimes a game may have, like, say, 6 modes.
Yeah.
And then you'll get a call. So we've added 10 more modes. So we need 10 more pieces of music to go along with those modes. I was curious if you could share how long on average it takes you to come up with a tune to go with the mode from a time standpoint.
Yeah. It really depends on the theme of the game and what I've chosen. If I'm working orchestrally, like for Pirates, that takes longer because I'm a guy, I'm trying to drive 90 virtual people around and get them to do stuff. So I can't just write the riff, I have to orchestrate it and do all that. So those take longer, 3-4 days if I'm inspired. If I'm doing things more synthetic, like the opening slide, and people like it, I might get lucky and do one of those in an afternoon. But if I'm working in quick drying concrete with an orchestra and I do something, and then it's rejected for some reason, then it even takes longer because I have to redo it. So it's all over the place depending on what I've chosen. Sometimes at the very beginning of the game, the hardest part is picking, the style. How are we going to proceed forward? Unless the client really has a strong opinion, it's down to me. And I got to pick a mode that I'm going to try to make 16 variations of, kind of. Pick an approach. And the first one, or the first 2 may be really hard. After that, after you've picked a thing and then you're riffing on it, it becomes easier. Brian.
For the homebrew people making pinball machines.
Yes.
Do you have any advice, like what they should be thinking about when they do their sound, to make their sound just be professional? Like, what should they be thinking about when they're doing sound in the homebrew machine?
Yeah. The major thing I think about, well, it's not one. There's at least 3. Number 1, my clients always focus on the music and the call-outs. They don't think about the sound effects anywhere near as much. My feeling is you don't play the music, and you don't play, the call-outs happen, and they happen in response to what you're playing, but you really play the sound effects if it's done right. So you've got to focus on getting those right. Now, what does that mean? What are good sound effects? To my mind, they are sound effects that are appropriate to the theme. So I wouldn't do synthetic stuff in Pirates. Makes that really hard, right? They are also bound to information, and that's the hard one, right? I like to do a lot of progressives. There's a lot of progressive events in pinball. You hit one of a series of 3, and I want the player to be able to sense when they've hit the second one without having to look. And so you can do that with sound. It's a non-speech language, so it's not instantly accessible, but if you've played the game 6 times, you don't have to look anymore because I only have to hit this bank one more time and I will complete it. And the sound for that, of course, is a much bigger progressive. But I also, there's the information, okay? There is the notion of, wait, I hit that target's already lit. There should be a sound there. People don't think about that because the ball, in a modern pin, the ball moves so fast, it's visually hard to track. But sound is unambiguous, right? So you may not have seen the ball head over there, but if you hear that sound, oh, I hit one that I've already hit. That means I need to go over there again and hit the unlit one. So that's information that's coupled to these events. And you've got to think, how can I bind, and then how can I create sounds that convey that in a non-speech way? Because too many people just think about doing the whole game in call-outs. And that's very clear, but most speech short of is boring. It's just not as exciting. And sound effects should be designed properly, visceral. Okay, we're wrapping it up. Thank you very much, Seattle. And Internet.